Welcome to another edition of Trail Runner Nation. My name is Don Freeman.
And I am Scott Warr. What if we told you that discomfort isn't something that you need to avoid, but something that you should actually seek after? You know, as trail and ultra runners, we're already pushing ourselves into that pain cave. But what if we could use that discomfort to become stronger, more resilient, and even perform better? In this episode, Don and I, this is actually a conversation that we started on the trail, and I said, stop. We need to have this discussion with the record button on. But we're going to dive into and discuss the science of discomfort. Now, how are we qualified? We talked about that too. The only reason we're qualified is neither of us have laryngitis. We have a voice, and we have a record button. That's only qualifications. So keep that in mind as you go through this this episode. But we're going to talk about why modern comfort culture might be making us weaker, and how endurance athletics, military training, and even I lived in Korea for a while. Even monks use controlled suffering to sharpen both their body and their mind. So that's what the topic is today. Don, where do you want to jump off? Actually, let's discuss how this topic came up. We started down the trail. We hadn't even reached the first turn, and you had started talking to me about cold baths or ice baths or whatever you call it, right?
That's where we started. And keeping in mind, hey, this is kind of the jumping off spot of a discussion for you and your trail running friends later to talk about. We just hope to inspire some better conversations. But, you know, the first one out is this one. So, you know, with a little bit of grace, we're going to give it a go. So on that run, I had just completed an ice bath. And I know that there are people out there that have done it for 10 years or better and would have plenty to share. But in the last few months, I have practiced this breathing technique, Wim Hof breathing, and ice plunge. And what do you know about me, Scott? Do I like to be cold?
That is one of your weaknesses. That is the
kryptonite.
That is a kryptonite. He will show up at the trail in 90-degree weather with long tights and a jacket.
Just for safety, because you never know.
And a beanie. And then question whether he should bring gloves.
So I hate the cold, but somehow I got talked into this peer pressure, no doubt. I went to a retreat, a workshop, call it what you want, but included in that was some breath work through the Wim Hof technique, where we listened to a video and copied and did it, and then go into an ice bath and sink down in and just settle for 15 minutes, not 15, for 5 minutes. Felt like 15 for 5 minutes. And I did it, and I thought to myself, you know what? There's such a connection, a correlation between trail running, doing hard things, and doing this.
Now, you've heard Don say Wim Hof a couple times. If you don't know what that is, we're not going to discuss that. Just Google or go to YouTube and type in Wim, W-I-M, Hof, H-O-F-F, I think.
Well,
2 Fs.
If you get 1 F, it'll get you there.
Google will correct it if you're wrong. But Google that and you can find out what that is. But the first time I think Don practiced this, he sent me a photo. And it was a photo of these big tubs, like jacuzzi-sized tubs, that had ice floating in the tub. And he's up to his chin, as well as there's probably 4 or 5 other people, and they all look like they're sitting in a jacuzzi. Like it's not cold. It's like warm, wonderful water. And then he says, we need to have a run so that we can talk about this.
So, Scott, what you left out was it did look like steamy water because they also put in dry ice.
What?
So
I didn't know they put dry ice in there.
It was in there as well. And
wow.
one poor, they don't do it anymore because one poor soul sat on a piece and didn't know it until he got out and was scarred for a while. So it was a genuine experience. And the water at that point was, because there was a number of us in there, it was 41 degrees. So that's for those that are ice bath people, cold plunge, they want to qualify. What was it? and it was cold enough to want to get out. I'll tell you that.
So I want to, and I should say that we had a podcast about ice baths. I don't know how many months or years ago. I think Alex Hutchinson came on and we talked about the science of ice baths. But I had started doing it because it was kind of a trendy thing to do. And I don't have an ice bath, but I do have a pool, and it was in the winter. And so my pool is not heated. It's very cold. And I used to do that for probably 3 or 4 months. But I want to get your impression, because I've never been in an ice tub that has ice or even dry ice in it. Tell me about what you first felt when you went in there and what kept you from jumping out like a frog in boiling water.
Well, probably the same thing that keeps me jumping out of a long run is you're with people. It's with the community. You don't want to look like that guy. So, I'm going in.
You don't want to be the weakest link, right?
That's right. And the clock started once everybody was in. So if everybody's in and you're standing up to your ankles, that's uncool because they're waiting on you to get in. So you have to get in. So it's that peer pressure that really made it all happen.
So tell me about the first feelings. You're in there up to your chin. What are you feeling, and how are you dealing? What are you feeling? How are you dealing?
So
that? That's a little bit of alliteration. I think that's is that what it's called, Ryan?
I think that's called rhyming.
Or it's just rhyming. Okay, maybe poetry. Okay, whatever. But it was very good.
It was poetic. It was poetic and it's
spontaneous too. Okay, go ahead. Sorry.
It all started with the breathing first, and they're connected in a way because it's accepting what you're doing to settle into the discomfort, and then knowing you're going to survive. The outcome is going to be fine. And so it's that mindset to get into that. And it started with the breathing and the Wim Hof breathing.
Did you learn this breathing technique before you got in?
Well, like most people, I'd heard about it, maybe tried to avoid it, and then thought, that's foolishness. Why would I not do that? I have plenty of air around me. I should use it. And I don't need to conserve it. So
was there a technique, or were you just consciously focused on your breathing?
Well, check the show notes, because we'll link the YouTube clip that's free for service out there, and you can participate. He'll lead you through it. And there are other videos out there as you become more advanced. Maybe he has some, but he brings you through the complete process. There's some background noise, things to focus on, to let your mind wander a bit, but he leads you through inhalation and exhalation and exhalation, and doing a number of those. So you hyperventilate and then breathe all the way out and then hold for a minute and a half, up to 2 minutes, and just holding it and just settling in and not allowing yourself to breathe in until it's time. He does a nice job with encouragement and timing as you're doing it.
Do you do this before you get in or after you get in?
Well, they don't have to be done together. But in this event, the retreat that I went to, we did it first. And there was some good wisdom behind that, because your instincts are to take a breath. And when you're in the ice bath, your instincts are to get out. So it's really about just settling in, just accepting what's there, settling into the moment, and then just trusting that when it's over, you're going to get out. And
I was going to say, I liked what you said, and I think this is a golden nugget of the episode that maybe we can dwell on a little bit later, but I want to make mention that you've already talked about this is something that is pretty difficult to do, but that there is no risk of dying. If you got into an ice bath for 5 minutes, you're not going to die. I think they've proven that you can be in an ice bath for hours and not die.
But wait, Ryan, that's a good chance for you to check that. Yeah, that's a fact. Can I survive in an ice bath for hours? They recommend not going over 4 minutes. There are people that have done it longer. The gentleman that was there had done it 30 minutes and actually called Wim Hof and said, "Hey, I just did it for 30 minutes. He said, "You are crazy. Don't do it that long." So you announcing that hour and a half or two, or just a half a day, is a bit reckless, Scott.
Ryan, can we put some kind of a legal disclaimer that do not try this at home? Or maybe you should. But I think
Wait, he's got information for us, Scott.
It,
Go
it
ahead,
can
Ryan.
be potentially dangerous and potentially fatal because of a cold shock response. So disclaimer, but you're probably fine.
Ryan says you're probably fine. So, go ahead, Scott.
Yeah, I just say if the producer says you're fine, you're probably fine. I would say, maybe not put dry ice in your bathtub the first go around. Maybe just turn on the cold water and get in the cold water the first time and see how you react. But I think that let's kind of back up just a minute and like I said in the intro, I'm just finishing or I'm in the middle of watching the second season of 1823. No,
1923.
It's the middle one, 1923. And they're talking about this is the time in Montana or the United States where they're finally getting
Scott, no spoiler alert. I haven't seen it yet.
No. There's no spoilers here. But it's that time in the history of mankind where they're getting electricity and running water and central heating and stuff like that. Dishwashers and clothes washers. So they're getting into the time that makes us kind of soft and comfortable. And if we look at ourselves today in 2025, we live in a very comfortable time. We can regulate the temperature in our homes. We have running water. We don't have to go grow our own food. We can just run down to the grocery store. So there's many things that make us comfortable. And I think that's what kind of draws many of us to trail running is it's a little bit more primitive. You have to go out. There's no shortcut unless you cut the trail, which is not recommended. You got to stay on the trail. But you have to propel yourself and you have to go through the highs and the lows. And I think there's something that draws us to that. Why do you think that is, Don?
Well, I think probably for all of us listening to this, we're all runners, and we're attracted to that because I think our DNA really drives us to that point. We're survivors by nature. Our ancestors survived, and that's why we're here. And I think we're called back to those moments of a little bit of struggle, a little bit of a heavy lift, and we feel accomplishment because of it. And I think that we don't get that anywhere else because we have thermostats and refrigerators and all the things you talked about. And it's nice to go out and express that part of our, genetic skill set. And we'd be robbed if we didn't go out there and practice some of that. And I think we experience that when we're out there.
Yeah, I think the other part of this, which is maybe it's part of it, maybe it's separate from it, I don't know. But there is, like you said, the community part of this, that we're going out there on the trail and doing, running a little bit further, a little bit more altitude, a little bit quicker or whatever than we would normally do on our own, that we're pushed to a point of discomfort when we're with our tribe. But yet we do feel some comfort because you have a friend with you or a couple, 2 or 3 friends that are with you that may have some more experience, or you're going through it together. What do you think about that as a community sufferfest, or I wouldn't say sufferfest, but getting into discomfort with your tribe?
Well, I think that that's the other part of that genetic predisposition that we have is that we are built to do things together and we find strength together and we feel comfort when we get to experience that brought our ancestors this way. We get a taste of that too. So if you call back into the experience of our, great grandparents, they might say, here's what I did. And you'd have at least a taste of it, at least an indication that they went through it. And I think we get stronger as humans when we gather together. And we've talked about it a billion times. We have soft skin, we don't have sharp teeth, and we're not real fast, and our muscles aren't real great. We could get beaten by most predators out there, but together, we've managed to stick around.
Yeah, I think that's true. One of the things that I want to talk about is the difference between the first time that you did this, and you say that you've been doing this regularly for the last month or two,
Mm-hmm.
and I know because you've told me you've been doing the same thing. You've been getting in your pool that is probably 55,
51, yeah.
51 degrees. So I know it's warmer than the ice bath, but what have you found as you've been doing this in a disciplined manner, meaning you a consistent manner? You're doing it every day or every other day or 3 times a week or whatever you're doing. Is it easier as you have experience?
Well, no shocker here, no pun intended, but I want to get out of 41 degrees just as much as I want to get out of 51 degrees. I'm not a big fan of anything below 104. That's my threshold. So either one that I want to get out. But what I've learned is that to do it, you just have to have a mindset, a single mindset, and to go straight in. It's not a dive in the pool. It's a walk into the pool. I make it to hip height, and then I just settle in, all in one motion. The decision's made as soon as I step my first step into the pool. My next step, literally, is kneeling down on my knees and just being there up to my throat in this cold. I don't fight it. I don't make my decision that maybe I'm going to not do it or do it. No, the decision's made. First step, straight in, straight down.
That's interesting. I'm as you say that, maybe I was not getting the full benefit when I was doing it, because what I would do is I would take 2 steps into the pool and get up to the point of no return, meaning near the apex of my crotch. And then I would dive in. I would dive in head first, and I would swim across lengthwise to the pool, swim back, and then sit on the ledge up to my neck. But I would do the dive in and go actually all the way over my head and go to one end of the pool and the next. So maybe that I wasn't getting the full benefit of the mental prep of this,
or maybe more, because it's tough to move. And I've heard people say the more advanced is moving in the water. I try to stay still as possible. I mean, opening up my fingers, there's intense cold that comes to the fingers as they move. I'm not moving at all, and I'm hoping that no one gets in anywhere around the pool to stir the water. I don't want any motion. So you doing that maybe puts you on the advanced level. That's good, Scott.
I don't know. I did do a little research on this, and you may argue with that, but I did a little research, and one of the things that I found out was there was one person that did this ice that built their own, because they can be pretty expensive. You can buy them commercially, and they can be pretty expensive. So he decided to build his own, but he had this tub that he had a recirculating pump, and so it was not only really, really cold with ice floating, but the water was moving. And he was saying that it's probably more difficult when the water's moving, because if you get in an ice tub by yourself, your body kind of warms around your body. And so that water that's in contact with your body can maybe warm up a half a degree. I don't know what it can do. We didn't do any measurements in this. No science was involved in this podcast. But he was saying,
research for that matter. Go ahead.
I did research. I'm telling you. But with that water moving constantly, and it's moving cold water across your skin, he said, "Is that difficult?
Mm-hmm.
Boy, is that difficult."
Yeah. So I think that's why you getting in and diving has got to be tougher. I wouldn't want to do that. So getting in and just settling straight down and committing to that. I put a pair of shocks on, of aftershocks,
Headphones.
Yeah, headphones, and listen to some meditation type music, just to lose myself into any. I would follow the music and follow the whatever I'm listening to, and just visualize, a journey with that music. And I knew when that 3-minute mark was up, it was about done, and then I knew I'd have a minute left, because your mind's going through a lot of different things, like how much time has it been, but you've got to shut all that stuff down. And that's one of the things that I have on my list to talk about, is shutting things down and being singularly focused when running and not listen to all the mental chatter that goes on. So I think there's a lot of connections between the skills that you learn with breathing and the ice tub that correlate to us being out on the trail, or I wouldn't have been interested in it. I said, Scott, we've got to talk because this is standing still, trail running stuff.
Okay, so I do have a question about that. If the purpose to get in the ice tub is to experience the feeling or the experience, right? You're getting in there to experience it, but you're saying you're putting on your headphones, and I'm using quotes right now, quotes, distracting yourself. Are you getting the full benefit? Or obviously you're doing it because of something. I want to know what that something is, and do you think that it's cheating, or is it distracting you from the full effect of the ice bath?
Absolutely not. I think if anything, it is allowing me to learn how to block out external and focused internally on what I'm doing. To think, if you make it for the first minute is when you get a lot of this, get out. Your body's saying, hey, we don't want to be in here. But after a minute, things seem to silent down. They shut out. All the cold receptors are firing off, and they're like, this guy's not even listening to me. Everybody join in. All the cold receptors are firing off, and he's not doing anything. So they get tired of it. Your brain gets tired of hearing all these cold signals. And so after a minute, it just kind of silence, shuts down. You just ease into it, and you just accept it. You just trust that everything's good. And then so you get through that minute, and then you just stay there. And then I just try to focus on just being present. And I'm thinking to myself, this is exactly what I need during those long stretches when I get all this internal chatter coming in saying, boy, I'm tired. Boy, my legs are heavy. Boy, I think I feel something getting a little hot on my foot. Boy, there's a rock over there. I'd like to sit on that. I mean, all those things to stop you. I've got to stop that internal dialogue, that negative chatter, that I can then just focus on one thing like my breath. I can focus maybe on the footfall and listening to my cadence, focusing on something else besides all of these things telling me to take a breath during the Wim Hof breathing stuff, to get out of the pool when I'm going in, or to stop running when it starts to get hard, but to focus on something different. And that's why I think this is a key thing for long trail runs, for endurance events.
So this is mind over matter. You could make some dotted line relationships to this and the central governor. Your body saying, I am spent, I'm done, stop moving. And then your brain saying, no, we're not done yet. Let's continue to go. I'm curious, why have you continued to take ice baths? Well, are you doing it to help your running? Are you doing it to help other aspects of your life? Why are you doing it?
The answer's coming in right now, Scott. Hold on. Let me get this. Why I'm doing it. Okay.
Why did you continue to do it after that initial ice challenge? Ice thing.
The exact same reason that I run is because it translates to other areas of our life. One of your sayings that everyone knows now that I rolled my eyes with, and now that I'm a proponent of it, it'll make you a better runner, and maybe, just maybe, a better person. And that's what running does. But I think that's what this does as well. This takes an extreme something, name it, in your life that's extreme. There's a lot of stuff, because that's what life is. Take the extreme events and the chaos that comes around us and try to silence it out, control what you have control over, which is at that moment being in that environment, whether it's a high stress environment or long run environment or a cold plunge in an ice bath. All of those are external, but you have control of it internally. You shut out the noise, you relax, you settle in, you accept it. This too shall pass. There is a time you get out. You're not on the Titanic thrown overboard with no hope. You can get out. So you just have to endure the time, and you've done it before, and so you'll do it again. And there's great accomplishment, just like a long run. There's great accomplishment in showing back up to the car, having it done, driving home, saying, you know what? I did it. I didn't want to do it. I did it. and now I feel pretty good about myself because I did it. And I think that skill set translates to any area of our life where there's some stress.
I want to get back to that, but I also want to make an interlude statement here that we're talking about ice baths. Now, that's just one type of discomfort. There are many different types of discomfort. We're right in the middle of Ramadan, where a lot of people in the world are fasting during the daylight hours. And you think about, I don't practice that religion, but I know some people that do. And I don't know at what age you start fasting, but I would assume that they're teaching their kids at a young age. Once that sun comes up, there's no food. You shall not eat until the sun goes down. That's a long time to go without food, especially when you're conditioned to eat during the light hours. And so they're doing something that is very difficult, very, very discomfortable. During Ramadan, there's military service, and let's equate some of the stories that you have from being going through a Marine boot camp. There were some discomfortable situations that you went through. How did that alter your perspective or your life?
Oh, well, that's a heavy question, Scott. But I would say that I don't have an answer to that. How I know that I did something that I didn't think I could do, and I ended up doing it. Had to reach deep into what I had, didn't know what I had, and now after doing that, I was equipped to try something else hard. So a follow-up, please.
Yeah, I would say that it's a little bit different than getting in an ice bath, because when you're getting into an ice bath, it's premeditated. You've decided, I'm going to get into this ice bath or this pool that is really cold. I know it's going to be cold. I may not know how cold it is. After you've done it a few times, you know how cold it is. But going into Marine boot camp, did you have any idea of the type of discomfort that you were going to have?
What I had imagined was much greater than what actually happened. I imagined in my mind it was going to be, the worst thing that could ever happen, ever.
You're gonna get skinned alive.
Yeah, and someone rubbing alcohol on you I just thought of the worst, right? So it never got that bad ever. And that's the same thing I shared with you right before Western States, your first 100-mile run is expect to get hit by a bus.
Mm-hmm.
And there are no buses out on that trail. So I knew that wasn't going to happen, but expect that.
Well, one of the things, I read an article that talked about discomfort as a signal to progress. So we know that everybody that's listening to this or has either done this or is thinking about doing this, going a longer distance or becoming more disciplined and consistent as a runner. And it's really, a lot of times it's hard to see progress. I remember when I first started running, I decided I was going to run out my door and go down to the end of the block, which was 1.5 miles. I was going to go 1.5 miles and then run back 3 mile. And I couldn't do it. I had to stop and walk. And the next day I had to stop and walk. And the next day I had to stop and walk. And I didn't see progress very quickly. When we put ourselves in an artificial discomfort, like an ice bath, so getting in for 3 minutes and really doing something hard, the next time you get in, you may see some immediate progress. You already know what it's going to be like, and so you can endure it a little bit better. Or maybe you're staying in there longer. So doing these types of discomfort activities, you can maybe simulate discomfortable situations, but also see, by doing it over and over and over, you can see progress much quicker. Does that make sense? By your look, I'm thinking maybe I didn't make myself clear with that point.
Well, cold is cold, and so I'm not. I think I'm getting better at trying to compartmentalize my moment of being present in that cold and just accepting it. And so the urge to pop out and say, this sucks, I'm never doing this again, is decreased, knowing that I've accomplished it before. But running down the road for a mile and a half and back you're going to improve your cardiovascular and all the things that go along with that. And then we all enjoy the fact that you're running and think, I could do this all day. That's a completely different feeling than needing to walk at a mile and a half. So I think that you get better at the mental side of blocking out all those drives to get out. I think we get better at compartmentalizing, and that's one of the things I thought would be great for practicing this, and then doing something long is turning inside and just listening to the body and channeling out all the external negative chatter of, man, I'm tired, my legs are tired, everything's tired, my knee hurts, that rock looks comfortable. All of those things, I could put those to the side and just focus singularly on my stride, on my gait, on my breathing, all the heart rate, all those things, what my arms are doing, just focusing on me. And that's where I think these two practices work very nicely with getting out there. And that's why I'm excited about talking about it on a trail running podcast. Why else would I want to do that?
Yeah. How, I mean, obviously you're talking about focus. In the ice bath, we're going to use that first, and then we'll transfer into running. In the ice bath, how do you maintain focus? Okay, so yeah, you practice this Wim Hof breathing method that focuses you on your breathing, but inevitably there's going to be these thoughts that, holy freaking cold, get me out of here. My fingers are going numb, my toes are going numb, and having this negative chatter or other thoughts that start popping in your head as you're trying to focus on one thing. How do you bring yourself back to the one thing? How do you push away the negative thoughts, or maybe they're not even negative, maybe they're just random thoughts? How do you keep them out of your head and focus on the present? I think that's something else you said too. You feel success when you're in the ice bath, when you're focused on the present. You're not thinking about the hot shower afterwards. You're not thinking about, what happened before. You're focused on that moment. How do you push away those ancillary distracting thoughts?
We've talked about it. When you're out,
that's a long question. That probably could have been stated in a third of the time.
It could have been its own podcast, Scott. So one of the things that I think about as I'm in there is you can only think one thought at a time. You can't have a bunch of random thoughts coming through.
Okay.
You can only have one thought at a time. Then you have to choose your thought. I can choose, I want to get out. Yeah, you can choose that. You can say it's colder than I've ever remembered it. I'm sure that I'm going to die. That can be your thought. Or you could say, you can have trust, just settle in and just listen. Just listen to what you feel. And then I started to think, is this cold I'm feeling? Or what if this was hot? Maybe maybe it's hot I'm experiencing right now. I'm just trying to just play with that one moment, that one sensation. Well, maybe this is what hot feels like, and I'm just confused. And all these receptors that are firing off, they really are the hot.
They're lying to you.
Yeah, they're lying to me. I've got the wrong ones. What am I listening to? Maybe I'm conditioned to know cold is bad, and I'm listening to cold, but maybe it's hot. So then I kind of bounce back and forth. Is this hot or cold? I don't even know. And so just being in that moment and just practicing singular focus, one thing. And we've talked about it before on the trail. We've said, how long does it take you to go down the trail and forget about your electric bill, about your car payment, about your boss at work? I mean, how long do you have to be out there before all of a sudden all that stuff shuts down and it's just you on the trail? And that's compartmentalizing. That's being singularly focused.
You had texted me probably about 3 books worth of talking points before we did this podcast. I didn't read any of them. I told you I didn't, but I did see a comment or a phrase where you talked about multitasking. Tell us about that. That's impossible to multitask.
Right.
Is that what you're talking about? That singular thought that you can't think about multiple
Yeah.
things? Or are people convinced they can multitask?
Well, the multitask, it takes a lot of energy to multitask. You go from one thought to the next thought and you bounce back and forth. You can't really think about all the thoughts at once. So it takes a lot of energy to do that. And I think about, well, running on the trail and running long distances, one thing we know is you can't do math. The body's going to focus on what it needs to focus on. And so it's hard to do multiple things. And so, and there's an energy cost to it. And if you think about the brain, what have we learned? I don't even know. As I asked the question with a statement with a question, but 25% of our energy is from the brain churning its processes out. There's a lot of energy that's used for that. And so if you're running long distance, you need a lot of energy for that. Why should you lose some of it and let it drift off into these abstract thoughts or self-defeating thoughts or rationale to stop thoughts? You don't need that. You need to get to the end, to the next aid station or the finish line. So shutting some of that down and just staying focused on movement and what you need to process about, your stride, your gait, or what are you doing with hydration? Focusing on what you're doing is going to be beneficial. So learning to shut out noise is probably the takeaway. Shut out the noise.
There's a couple things that came out of another article that I read well, let's just talk about one of them, and then we'll talk about the other one. The first one is that people that put themselves in controlled, or maybe that's controlled, not the right word, but a situation that is discomfortable for them. Is discomfortable a word? I'm going to say it is.
Yeah.
Put themselves in a situation that's uncomfortable. They find that the people that do that regularly actually are able to persist in endurance sports longer. So this act of getting in an ice bath, or the act of fasting for a certain amount of time, or doing whatever, any kind of discomfort, if you do that on a regular basis and you learn to control yourself and control your thoughts, that those people are more able to persist longer in endurance events. So it's actually training your mind. Are you hoping that that's the case through your practices that you're doing right now?
Well, I mean, you talk about the physical side of the game and the psychological side of the game, and we love both of those. And we know that to get stronger physically, we need to push ourselves to limits so that we can tear ourselves down and rebuild ourselves stronger and go out and apply it again. And it takes those practicing those hard things to get more accomplished. A veteran versus somebody just starting out. The 1.35 mile guy that needed to walk certainly hadn't practiced enough yet. So just like the psychological side, we need to practice. Ryan, you can fix that, can't you? Just like practicing the physiological piece, we need to practice the psychological piece too. So we can get stronger psychologically, especially when we say 90% of the game is mental and the other 10% is in your head. We need to practice that side too. We just can't run and expect to be all that we can be when most of this is in between our ears.
That's a good answer. So the other thing that I loved about this article, it brought out the fact that personal growth, whether it's being a better runner, being a better person, being a better father, being a better husband, wife or husband, whatever, personal growth involves a self-control conflict. So the conflict is the benefits of whatever you're doing, whether that's being fitter, having more endurance or whatever, that part is delayed, but the cost is immediate. So the cost of pain, exhaustion, discomfort, whatever, those are immediate feelings, where the benefit is a delayed reward from that. So it's a self-control conflict where we're saying we're going to do this. I'm going to get in that 50-degree pool and stay in there for 3 minutes, and it's not going to be fun. It's going to be uncomfortable. That's the immediate that you feel, but you're doing it for a reason. And that reason is blank. It's going to make me more mentally tough. It's going to help me when I'm running a long race and I feel exhausted. There's a delayed result of the practice. Does that make sense?
Well, that's life, right? That's creating a savings account. I could spend this on the fair and eating, cotton candy now, and that would be great. Or I could put it in my savings account and spend it decades later. So
on a T-bone.
I wasn't talking about that night. I'm maybe a T-bone a few decades later. So I think that's life of just some small sacrifices along the way.
But I think that it's the perspective. I think when we sometimes get in a situation of discomfort, whether that's on purpose because of a choice we've made, or whether it's because of a choice someone else made, if it's a discomfortable situation, I think that we need to look at that as something that we're going to get a benefit out of that. So let's say that you got laid off at work. I mean, that sucks, right? You're now going to have to go through the work that it's going to take to interview and find the next job. But hopefully that experience is going to make you better. It's going to make you a stronger employee of the next company to go work for, or it's going to help you so that if it ever happens again, you know how to go out there and do it. I think that there's that delayed reward that comes from that immediate discomfort. But you have to have the right perspective. If you have the wrong perspective, let's say someone, I know somebody that recently, a friend of mine that got laid off, and for probably a month, they just complained and didn't do anything about it. And that's not a good place to be in. You're not looking at the big picture. You're not trying to find the gold at the end of the rainbow. That's probably not a good metaphor, because the good that comes out of the discomfort.
Well, why? Because St. Patrick's Day just passed us? Is that why it was poor?
It was yesterday.
So we talk about the why. We talk in the long run, right?
Yep.
The why has to be bigger than the problem at the time. The why you want to finish this thing has to be bigger than the problem you're trying to overcome.
Yep. Right.
And so if your why of creating a savings account is bigger than the desire to have cotton candy at the fair, okay, now the why overrides your desire to have that cotton candy. So you have to establish that why of what you're doing. It brings up, we've danced around this pain, discomfort, and kind of used it, as synonymous terms. And at least I was thinking that. Maybe nobody else did. But, we have to differentiate between discomfort and the pain. I mean, stepping on a needle is painful. And there's no doubt that you're not going to put all your weight on there if you can. And as soon as you're able, you're going to try to remove that needle. And that's pain. But discomfort is something that's just not convenient, or you'd feel better doing something else. Or, if I changed my environment just slightly, I would improve. I'll sit on that rock. That would be better. That's discomfort. But if you had a sharp, sticking in your foot, there would be no question. You would go to the ground and you'd remove it. So there's a difference between pain. So trying to work through painful knee or something like that is something completely different. We don't want to, throw out a mixed message there.
What about walking on hot coals?
I'm a skeptic. I don't know if those guys are really getting that done. And people say they do, and people trust. But I've got to, I don't think you cheat physiology. I think, a hot coal is going to burn tissue. So I've got to research that a bit. Maybe YouTube can help me.
Maybe you should go back and watch the Office episode where
watching the Office.
Where Pam walked across the hot coals, and she did it, and she was stoked after she was done.
Yeah.
She saw some benefits. She felt that now she was empowered to accomplish very great things. Isn't that? Am I remembering that episode right, Ryan? Ryan laughed when I said that. You've probably never seen that episode,
No,
Don,
but I'm gonna check it out.
Ryan's seen
I'm a big fan of Michael Scott.
I watched that episode probably like less than a month ago. It was great.
And I think it comes down to, one word that what came out of this for me was discipline. The discipline not to suck in some air because you're getting to your limit, or the discipline to get out of the cold water. And then I think, where else does that discipline apply? Well, it applies to me when the alarm goes off and I don't feel like getting up and going out there and, strapping on some shoes. It's cold outside. There's discipline there. There's discipline when you make your meal choices. There's discipline when it's time to go to bed. We can practice this stuff in so many different places, and maybe a cold plunge or some breathing exercises to push up against what you naturally would want to do, which is get out or take a breath, is just practicing that discipline. And if you can apply some of those lessons that we learn in those harsher environments, and it makes some of the stuff we do on a regular basis a little bit easier.
So putting yourself in a situation where you're uncomfortable. That's what that's the word I'm looking for. Uncomfortable.
Ryan will replace all those words, no problem.
Yep.
Can you do that, Ryan?
You can do that with AI.
I got it.
Obviously help us become more resilient, help us to handle difficult situations. Do you think back in 1923 or earlier, let's say 1823, when the pioneers were coming across the West and they were walking and their shoes didn't have soles in them and there were bleeding feet and it was hot and they had blisters and they didn't have enough food. Every day they were put into an uncomfortable situation. Do you think that they were more resilient than we are today?
Well, I'm going to say absolutely, but they didn't have a choice. The other choice was death, right? And they didn't want to let their community around them down, because if you laid down and die, why would nobody else would have hope? Just like, Scott gave up. I'm going to give up too, because he's a tough guy. So I think, the community, just like me getting into the cold water when they were waiting to start the clock and I was there up to my ankles going, I don't know, you have that pressure to keep going, to get in and do whatever you need to do. So I do think that there's community back then. Were they tougher? No, they didn't have a choice.
Well, I think that we're luckier that we don't have to be put in a situation. We're not thrown into a situation where we have to endure uncomfortableness. A lot of the things that we choose to do, whether that's walking across coals or getting in a cold bath, is something that we choose to do. And one of the things that I think that we need to think of is take these uncomfortable situations and use them as tools rather than barriers. So let's say that you're out on a long run in the middle of the summer and you drank all of your fluid and it's still really hot and you're sweating terribly and you bonk. Use that as a tool. Don't complain. Look at it as a tool that this is an uncomfortable situation. Didn't you take care of that earlier?
Yeah.
There's a little switch on the side of your phone that you can turn off the volume.
Practice your discipline and go ahead, Scott.
I can't remember. That threw me off. What was I talking about? It actually, we need to look at it as a tool, as a training tool, and not as something that we want to avoid all the time. Maybe people could argue with that, and it looks like
I'm going to argue because we're pretty fortunate. This is a first world comment. Your comment was we have a lot of people on this planet right now that are suffering greater than any of those people trekking across the U.S. with hope in their mind, in their eye, and not having shoes or maybe light on food. There are people that are suffering in just horrible ways all over the world right now. We can't forget about those, and they're tough.
Yeah. Well, I was going to say, I remember every time, if you've watched any of our YouTube episodes with Ian Sharman, you notice that he has on his uniform of with Sharman Ultra Coaching, and with the tagline "Embrace the suck," meaning the suck is going to come, but we need to embrace it and use it as a tool to help us become better. And I think even Don, you and I talked about this earlier. I don't know if it was verbally or via a text. We did that episode or a couple episodes on stoicism. We don't have, in many cases, we don't have control over the situations we're put in. Now, yes, you have control over the situation, whether I'm going to get in that ice tub or not. But there's some things that are out of our control that make it uncomfortable or make it hard. What we have control over is how we are going to react to that stimuli.
So, maybe the one reason that I would get into that cold plunge is because I didn't have a choice. I'd set it up so I had to do it. In my mind, I was considering myself a failure unless I got it done. So there was no question.
Explain that, elaborate on that. Are you saying when you got in the first time with the group? Because I know you get in there on your own now, and there's no peer pressure for you to get in now, or is that just self-imposed?
No, self-imposed. The same reason that I turned left to go longer instead of the shortcut to go right. I'd feel like a failure if I went the shortcut. I'm not going to turn early.
So you set high standards for yourself.
Well, I don't know if it's high standards. This is high expectations. Like, I don't want to be a failure. I'm going to run to the top if I can. I'm going to run to that point and then hard hike. If that's my goal, that's achievable, I'll do that. Obviously, I can't jump off a cliff and fly. I mean, let's be realistic. So I can run that far, and I'm a failure unless I can run that far. The rest I'll hard hike. So the same thing with the cold plunge or the breathing. I've committed. I'm going to do it. And once my mind is there, then that's where I'll go.
So we've been talking about this ice bath thing. Can you think of some other difficult situations you've been thrown into or have thrown yourself into that have helped you become stronger?
I think any long run that we do, I think it's everybody listening to this. Well, if you've listened to this whole podcast, that's one thing that you've done that's very hard. So put that on your list.
You can put this in the discomfort profile.
And you could call it cross training, mental training, anything you want. You listen to it twice, and we'll send you a belt buckle. I mean,
if you're keeping score, you can check off your uncomfortable thing today by listening to this episode. Stay in the present. Stay in the present, listener. Focus.
So I think we've all done that, Scott. Anything that's hard, we've done, and I think we relish those moments. And I don't say me and you. I mean everyone that's been out there running. We're going to come across those moments that it's just easier to pull the pin and be gone.
Yeah. Well, I think it's important for us to find ways to put ourselves in a little bit of discomfort. Be safe about it. Don't be stupid. I think back, we did another episode on the practice of misogi, right? Where you do one big challenge for the year where there's a high likelihood that you're not going to be successful, but there's also a very low likelihood that you're not going to die from it. I think that is somewhat related here. You're putting yourself into, this is maybe the next step where you could get in a ice bath a couple times a week or 3 times a week or however you want to do it. You can do that very easily. It's very something that doesn't take a lot of time. But maybe put out some goals in the future that's a big event that will also put you into a situation of discomfort.
So I think
like a misogi.
I think anybody that's listening could probably draw their own list. What are some hard things that I want to do that I haven't done? What are some things that I do that I kind of push off that I just don't lean into and do? In fact, once I do it, it wasn't as bad as I was imagining. So I think there's a lot of places that we can all draw our own list and come up with, you know what? maybe that practice of doing a hard thing like that will allow me to do these not so hard things. Now,
Yeah.
now not breathing or getting into cold water isn't the, the greatest thing in the world to do, but it does have its the side that makes you not want to do it. That's a good exercise, a good mental exercise.
It's not surprising that this is a universal rule, if you will. I think about, you and I have both spent time in the gym, that, when you're out in the gym, where you're going to get the benefit is on that fifth rep where you can barely push it up or pull it up, and you're struggling. And at the end of the workout, your muscles ache, and you're putting your muscles and your body through some discomfort. And the result is that your body rebuilds. The muscle gets stronger, the muscle gets bigger, the muscle gets better. And I think that this is, a similar situation, but it's more in your mind. I'm sure there's some physiological benefits from getting in an ice bath, or doing a Ramadan fast for a month. There's got to be some benefits to that, but I think it's your body, that back to Alex Hutchinson's book, the curiously elastic endurance metaphor, that your body, you're putting it through a stress, and it's going to react to that. It might be mental, it might be physiological, it might be biological, but there's benefit by putting stress, and it's a good thing for the body.
Well, I think like cross training, I think we've all decided that we're better off if we do some weightlifting and things, and some stretching and all the things that help us physically with our body for running. But we're ignoring that. Well, so what are you doing mentally? What's your mental side? What's on your list of mental training, since you're in a sport that's 90% and 10%, like we talk about? Why do you ignore that? Well, I think I've asked this question before a long time ago, Scott. Good thing I bring it up again. If you had a choice, to be, before your race, to be 10% in 10% better shape or 10% mentally tougher, which would you take? You're putting the bib on. You have to take the red pill or the blue pill. One's for 10% mentally tougher, 1%'s 10% physically fitter.
Did you just make a movie reference?
No, I don't know the movie, but I've been around people long enough to know red pill, blue pill.
That's a movie reference for you.
I didn't know that.
You haven't, and I guarantee you haven't seen the movie, because there's a lot. No, I shouldn't say that. Anyway, it's a movie reference. Obviously, being prepared 10% more mentally tough, I think that's important. As we mentioned at the beginning of this podcast, this is just a discussion that Don and I had on the trail. You guys that are listening have lots of great discussions on the trail. This is just a discussion. It's opinion. There's a little bit of maybe some research that we threw in there,
like the 1 to 2
and
hour
experience.
The 1 to 2 hour ice bath. I call that one out, and possibly the person that was on The Office. What was her name? That walked across the coals. Pam walked across the coals. I think probably a little suspect on that one. So there's a few.
This is the one time you're going to have to find and read the show notes, because I am going to list in the show notes a link that says that you can survive a very low temperature ice bath for multiple hours. I'm going to find it. It's going to be true. So those who are listening, I don't have it on the tip of my tongue right now, but I'm going to find it. I'm going to put a link in there so that you can. It's not something I made up.
Where is Dr. Mark Cucuzella when we need him? I need some of his wisdom right now.
Alex Hutchinson is the skeptic that looks at the research. But I think that it's important for us to do hard things, and we can simulate some of those hard things. We don't have to go for a 30-mile run every day to put ourselves in a running discomfortable situation. We can do some other things that can help train the mind. like getting in an ice bath or getting in a sauna or, doing something like that.
So if you're one of the runners, and I admit I'm with you, that when it gets long and hard out there, that all of a sudden negative chatter comes in that talks about how dumb this is and how smart you would be if you just stopped. If you start thinking about how much discomfort maybe your hip is in when there was no other sign of a hip problem any other time in your life. If you're that person, I think that doing some mental strengthening and exercises might be a benefit to your running game. I think it'll help mine.
Yeah. Well, these are just our opinions, and it was a fun discussion. I would be interested to hear from the listeners to see what they've done to put themselves in a situation of discomfort.
That's what you'd be interested. You'd be interested in that, Scott. I would be interested to hear of anybody that finished this podcast in its entirety, and we'll know because they'll put down the number 15. That's the number I brought up. But if anybody has listened to it this far, Ryan, can we tell how long people listen to it?
No,
we can't.
No.
All right. Well, respond to us in some way.
Well, you can either put a comment in the on social media, or on our website. If you go to the episode, you can make a comment there. We'd love to hear what your thoughts are on this subject. We'd love to hear if you've found a way that puts you in discomfort in a regular basis and how that's helped you become a better runner. I'd be interested to see, because I've done getting in my swimming pool when it's 51 degrees out, when the water's 51 degrees out, but it's not something I enjoy. I'd like to find another way. And I like the cold. Anyway, we hope that you enjoyed this. We hope that by doing some of these uncomfortable things that you can lace up your shoes and even run
Mas.